In due course, citing lack of resources, the RCAF said, listen, we can't do this for you anymore. 1935, in that era, they only had 119 aircraft, so you can imagine if we think they're stretched now, they of course were stretched then. So at the end of the day, that was probably a really good thing from the RCMP's perspective, because it forced us to have to look at getting our own fleet. And given that the results put milk and potatoes on my table, I'm glad they did. We stood up, of course, as I mentioned, April 1st, 1937, post office in downtown Toronto. In May 1937, we started to receive the first of the 4 Dragonflies, an aircraft that I particularly happen to like. The idea of an RCMP Air Service had long been touted by Sir James Howden McBrien, a staunch supporter of the airborne law enforcement concept, and as an aside, the former Chief of Staff of the Canadian Armed Forces. It should also be noted that McBrien, among his various other accomplishments, was also a private pilot. His moth was registered CF AAA. So this is a photograph I'm sure you've seen before. It's got Commissioner McBrien. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1938, but the man had vision. I'm sure you've all been surfing through the TV and you've captured the American television, you know, the chases, the activity that goes on with the helicopters and airborne surveillance. I mean, that's where we ended up. And he was one of the people that started that vision for Canada. So here he is. This is CF AAA. The photograph was provided to the museum by the Canadian Flying Clubs Association, to whom it was registered on the 16th of June, 1929. This is another photograph. This is Commissioner McBrien working his way on the Trans-Canada Patrol in 1936. The initial caption that was on the back of the photograph, when I obtained it, in 1936, one last flight in an RCAF Fairchild 71 took Commissioner McBrien on an 11,000-mile inspection tour of RCMP detachments that lasted 1 month with only 5 days spent wholly on the ground, which speaks well to the maintenance and everything else. Commissioner McBrien, go figure, is the individual standing on the right as opposed to the 2 guys that are doing the work. This is one again of Commissioner McBrien and RCAF de Havilland Puss Moth 169, circa 1935. This photograph was obtained from the RCMP Museum in Regina. They have binders of stuff that people have accumulated and donated over the years, and some wonderful photographs in there. In this reference to the particular aircraft, it served with the fledgling RCAF from 1932 through 1937 when it was struck off charge. For the Daily Colonist, Victoria, BC, Wednesday 22nd of June, 1932. Mounted Police for Bear Lake, Northwest Territories. Mounties will be stationed at Fort Norman to control activities in the mining area. Royal Canadian Mounted Police will be stationed at Fort Norman in the Great Bear Lake area of Canada's north, according to an announcement made today by Major General McBrien, CB, CMG, DSO, Commissioner of the RCMP. Officers may be stationed also at Echo Bay, near the center of the mining fields. Major General McBrien arrived in Calgary in his Puss Moth plane today after a trip from Edmonton that included a near crash at Red Deer. The flying general nearly came to grief when he landed at the Red Deer Municipal Airport. I almost lost my plane at Red Deer, he said. I landed in the hay at Red Deer Municipal Airport and almost turned it over. Otherwise, I had a splendid trip. From the Daily Colonist, Victoria, BC, Thursday, 23rd of June, 1932, page 10. Navigates own plane on inspection tour, Vancouver, June 22nd. Major General J.H. McBrien, Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, on a tour of inspection of Western detachments, arrived here at 5 o'clock this afternoon on a solo flight from Calgary. General McBrien took off from the Prairie City this morning to the coast, stopping at Grand Forks and Princeton. He left the latter place at 3:10 o'clock on the last leg of his hop, setting his plane down at Sea Island Airport here 1 hour and 50 minutes later. General McBrien intends to fly to northern outpost of the Mackenzie River before returning to Ottawa. Over the years, the RCMP, of course, as I've touched on, we've operated Norseman, Grum and Goose, Stinson, Cornells, Beech 18s, Beavers, Otters, King Air, as well as several models of Cessnas, Bell, Aerospatial helicopters, IAI Westwind, Piaggio Avantis, Pilatus PC-12. I'm just going to touch on some of the aircraft, as I mentioned, that I particularly like. I met Fred Hodson last week at the convention, and we were talking about this, and he says, "Have you seen this particular photograph?" I said, "Well, it's part of the presentation." He says, I'm actually, he thinks, he's the fellow in white standing by Mike Papa Bravo. He became an apprentice with de Havilland, Canada in 1935. He was there the day we accepted delivery of the Dragonflies. Photographs were taken with our various air crew and the general up in front, of course. And at some point, apparently, someone said, you know, we need some guys in here in white coveralls. You, and you. And Fred Hodgson was one of those fellas. So that's amazing. I mean, you're sitting there, you're sitting there getting these goosebumps that after all these years, this chap comes up to you and says, I was there when that happened. This is Mike Papa Bravo at Moncton, circa 1937. This particular photograph is via Paddy Gardner. During World War II, of course, the Dragonflies and crew were absorbed into the RCAF. I'm just going to do this is a little bit of a quote. I can do little to improve on the Dragonfly story as told by Bryn Elliott. He's a bit of an aviation historian, ex-London Metropolitan Police, as am I, as it happens. And he's heavily involved with the Airborne Law Enforcement Association from the British perspective. Also a writer and quite an in-depth contributor to Air Britain. On April 1st, 1937, a police detachment moved into North Toronto and took over part of the post office building on Montgomery Avenue in preparation for the delivery of 4 new aircraft for the unit. 8 pilots, each with a variety of former flying experience, were allotted to the new unit. The first 6 RCMP pilots were given refresher training, each having been former military pilots, in the aircraft of the Toronto Flying Club while the new equipment was delivered. This is an interesting little sidebar incident. Staff Sergeant T.R. Mickelson, so he would be a member of the RCMP, one of the police pilots was taxiing the demonstrator aircraft, CB Bravo Delta Delta, across the airfield on April 19th when the machine collided with and wrote off a parked Toronto Flying Club Puss Moth, Charlie Delta Mike. The Puss Moth had been sitting with its engine running, probably minding its own business, but Nicholson saw it too late to miss it. In spite of his best efforts, I guess. In spite of all the damage caused by 3 engines and whirling propellers, the 2 in the Moth survived uninjured, although the policeman's leg was broken. So that was the end of that particular quote. This is another one via Paddy Gardner, 3 crew by an unknown Dragonfly. Left to right, and you can see the caption yourself. The first chap here on the left, of course, was on loan to the RCMP Aviation Section from the Department of Transport. He operated the radio ground equipment. Corporal C.E. Gray, with uniform hat, perched at a jaunty angle, of course, was alive in 1970, but clearly has passed away since then. And the last chap is another one of the air crew, Corporal H.F. McClellan. First of the RCMP Dragonflies, each predominantly dark blue with yellow wings, was delivered on May the 5th, 1937. Registered Mike Papa Alpha. The second, go figure, Mike Papa Bravo, was delivered at the end of the same month. The third machine to arrive bore the out-of-sequence registration Mike Papa Delta when it arrived in service in June 1926. The final delivery on July 15th of the initial equipment was Dragonfly Mike Papa Charlie, the former Mike Delta Delta, which had been damaged during the demonstration flights and activity with Mickelson. They were initially posted out to Moncton to conduct anti-smuggling patrols and from all accounts did remarkably well. In short order, we moved Norseman Mike Papa Echo, our first Norseman, out to Moncton, and it was so very efficient and so very effective at what it was doing that the then 3 remaining Dragonflies, one having been sold off into the commercial sector, were moved back to Rockcliffe.
Yeah.